What's up, guys? So today we're building a brand new $1,500 gaming PC inside of the Fractal Ridge. And the whole purpose of this build, the whole purpose of this video is to see what kind of performance you can get out of a gaming PC in the smallest footprint possible. And that's the reason why I went with the Fractal Ridge. If you compare it to other mini ITX cases like the Fractal Terra, which is a 10-liter case, or the NR200, which is an 18-liter case, this one comes in at 12.6 liters, but it has a much smaller footprint compared to those cases just because it's using a lot more vertical height and depth compared to a standard, mini ITX case that, even though it is a lot smaller than an ATX or even micro ATX case, it still takes up a similar footprint on your desk. But looking at this Fractal Ridge, if you compare it to something like an Xbox One X, it's not that much different in terms of size. If you look at the width of the two next to each other, it's not that much wider. And if you look at the height and depth of the case compared to an Xbox One X, it's not that much bigger. And considering you can fit $1,500 worth of performance in a case like this, and I'll show you the detailed parts list in a little bit, compared to the performance that you're getting out of something like an Xbox One X from a couple of years ago, it's kind of crazy the level of performance that you can now fit in these ITX cases. So in terms of the actual build, we're looking at an RTX 4070 Ti for our graphics card. And then in terms of the processor, we're looking at an i5-12600KF inside of an Asus motherboard with, 32 gigs of DDR5 memory running at, I believe, 5600 megahertz. So overall, a lot of performance is going to be packed inside of a system this small. The case can fit up to a 3-slot card, which is exactly what we're working with in terms of this 4070 Ti from Galax. So overall, I think we're kind of we should hopefully be maximizing the performance level that we can get out of a case like this. I was considering throwing in the RTX 4080 inside of this build, but it's like a 3.5-slot card. It could fit, it might not fit. We can maybe test that out, but I'm leaning towards the 4070 Ti just because it's the perfect level of performance when you pair it with the 12600K. I think we're gonna see some really good performance out of these parts inside of the Ridge, but of course we gotta put this thing together and actually test it out. So let's jump into that. First, give you a quick overview of the Ridge, the features, what comes with it into the box, and then of course we'll go through a quick build montage and test out the performance. So before we even jump into the Fractal Ridge, I want to get the motherboard completely set up. So of course we have our B660i motherboard from Asus. Now I could have gone with a Z690, even a Z790 to get, overclocking performance. Didn't really feel it was necessary. Of course, putting it inside of a Ridge, you're not going to be able to overclock crazy with this NHL9X65 cooler anyways. But we're going to get all the mounting hardware installed for our LGA 1700 CPU socket so that we can get our cooler installed. And overall, this cooler is only an 84 watt cooler, I should say, and the 12600KF is a 125 watt chip. So we're most likely going to run into some thermal throttling, but I believe this chip with this cooler should be able to handle the majority of gaming situations. We're not going to be throwing 125 watts at this chip consistently, and when we do, hopefully just the mass of the cooler should be able to withstand it. You do have 4 heat pipes there. Overall, a pretty decent beefy cooler for the size that it is, but we're going to get enough thermal paste onto this CPU to make sure we get good coverage on this LGA 1700 kind of larger size chip compared to previous generations. So we'll get a nice helping of thermal paste on there, and then we'll get the cooler installed. Of course, I'm definitely a little concerned that the 84 watt TDP of the cooler is not going to be able to sustain the 125 watts of the chip, but I think we'll be okay. So we're going to get this thing tightened down. We have those spring-loaded screws, so it's going to tighten down exactly how it should. Now, the one debate I'm having in my head is the cooler comes with a slim fan so that it stays at 65 millimeter height. I do have a slightly thicker Noctua cooler, again, 92 millimeters.
I don't know if it's going to fit clearance-wise within this case. We're going to throw the thicker one on to begin with, just to see if we potentially have the clearance to get away with it. It should be quieter. It should also hopefully blow a little bit more air and be able to keep this thing a little bit cooler for a little bit longer. So we're going to throw this fan on there, see if we get the clearance. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, though, our motherboard's now completely set up. We got our two 16 gigabyte 5600 megahertz DDR5 memory sticks. We also have a 1 terabyte NVMe PCIe 4.0 SSD. So this thing is really, really fast. So now that the motherboard is completely situated, it's time to get it installed, which is going to require us to remove this central support beam inside of the Fractal Ridge that also houses the expansion board for the PCIe slot. But just to kind of give you guys an overview of this case, it's a 12.6 liter case that's only 167 millimeters thick or wide. So it's a really, really small profile on your desk. Now, when it comes to the actual features of this case, you're looking at four 2.5-inch SSD drive bays. You're also looking at one USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port on the front, plus two USB 3.0, plus a microphone headphone combo jack, 3-slot expansion for our graphics card, two 140mm cooler or fans pre-installed. You can also swap those out for 120s. You can also fit three 80mm fans on the top above the GPU for extra exhaust. It's all steel construction. It can fit either SFX or SFXL power supplies inside of the case. You can get up to 325mm long GPUs installed, up to 335 if you don't have SSDs. But as you can see, this cooler is not going to work with this thicker fan installed on our CPU cooler. So I'm going to swap it back out for the thinner, low profile fan on top of our Noctua cooler. And now it's time to get the PSU installed. So we have a standard SFX Cooler Master 850 watt, 80 plus gold rated power supply that we're going to throw in to this case. Give us a little bit of extra room to work with. 850 watt, perfect amount of power for our 12600K and our 4070 Ti. I'm also just getting a little fan hub installed inside of the case, just so that I don't have to, if I ever need to swap these 140mm fans out, I don't want to have to try to take the motherboard out or take the top panel off to try to reach the fan header on the motherboard. Just easier to get this one central hub installed inside of the case in order to work around it. Now we're going to get the central beam installed back in with the PCIe riser board pre-installed. In order to install our GPU, it's a little bit of a pain. We have to remove all the case fans screws, at least the top ones, plus all the screws that actually hold the top panel to the case in order to fit our graphics card in. So in order to fit this 4070 Ti, it's a bit of a squeeze. It's like just up against both sides of the case. We get the extension PCIe slot onto our graphics card, and then it slots right in to that extension board. Overall, pretty simple process. Like, it's 8 screws, if that, to get the top panel off and then get our graphics card in. Super, super simple process there. Now the last step to the puzzle is to get our little base installed on the Fractal Ridge case, just to give it a little bit of a more supported, firmer route to the ground. Of course, that is what you want to see, and there it is, the finished product. It looks amazing, so compact with the 3-slot 4070 Ti and the 12600K.
Alrighty, so there we go. The build is finally done. It was a really, really interesting and fun experience to build inside of the Ridge. I mean, like, there is some quirks to building inside of it, but Fractal makes it super easy to kind of just walk yourself through it. I did not touch the manual a single time when putting this thing together. It was just super intuitive. Like, to take the top off to get the GPU in, having to take the support bracket out with the GPU, the riser cable connected to it, like taking that out, adding the extension onto the GPU in order for it to reach. All that was like super intuitive. But we're gonna have to see how the CPU cooler situation works out. I was hoping to fit that thicker 92mm fan inside of this case. It does fit, but it's like a real squish job, and I just don't feel super comfortable leaving it like that the entire time. But yeah, we'll see how the temperatures perform with the standard slim 92mm fan on the L9 X65, but maybe we'll throw that thicker one on there depending on how the temperatures look. But it's time to start this thing up and see if it actually boots. Sounds like we're making contact with something in the GPU. So we'll take a look at that really quick. Now for take 2 of the first boot of our Fractal Ridge PC. We installed the slim 120mm fans now on the backside of the GPU, so hopefully no more rubbing with the GPU fans. It looks like there's plenty of clearance now. Before, the fans were right up against the GPU fan, so as soon as we boot this thing up, we should be able to tell, and we're good. No more crazy squeaking coming from the GPU, and everything is looking perfect. As long as we get our boot screen on our monitor, we should be all set. There we go. Perfect. So, like the first time, no issues in terms of booting up. Now that we got rid of the squeaky fan, we are good to go. So at idle, we're looking at just 34 degrees on our CPU and just 32 degrees on our RTX 4070 Ti. But now it's time to stress test this thing, so let's throw the side panel on it, run some Cinebench and some Furmark for about 10 minutes and see where our temperatures end up.
So we're about 2.5 minutes into our stress test with Cinebench and Furmark, and we've already started to thermal throttle. Surprised it honestly took this long to get to a thermal throttling point. We're sitting at 100 degrees C, but our CPU clocks are still sitting at 4.5 gigahertz on all cores, down from like 4.7 gigahertz at peak turbo boost on 1 or 2 cores. So overall, still not crazy, degradation to the performance of our CPU, but after about 10 minutes, now we're starting to see the hit. So we're looking at 4.2, 4.3 gigahertz on the performance cores, down now like 400 megahertz overall. So yeah, the thermal throttling definitely has impacted our CPU performance.
So there we go. After a full 10 minutes of stress testing, after about 2 minutes, our CPU did end up thermal throttling. It kept its original clock speeds for about, another couple minutes, but by the end of the run, by the end of the 10 minutes, we were looking at around 4.3 to 4.2 gigahertz on pretty much all of the performance cores, which is around a 400 megahertz drop from the kind of peak clocks of the 12600KF. However, for our GPU, we're right around 67 degrees as our max GPU temperature, so perfectly fine on the 4070 Ti. A little concerning on the 12600K, but we didn't end up dropping that many clocks compared to the kind of peak clock speed of this chip. So honestly, I think in games, we're not going to hit 100% utilization on our CPU. So we should be fine from a CPU temperature perspective. I think we'll put that to the test. Of course, we're gonna throw this into some real world benchmarking with some games just to see how it performs. But I don't expect it to actually thermal throttle whatsoever when it comes to gaming. We should sit around 30-40% utilization. Hopefully, keep it under 80 degrees Celsius on the CPU is the hope. And then, of course, we'll be pushing that 4070 Ti for all it's worth to try to maximize our gaming experience. So it's been about a week since finishing up the Fractal Ridge build, and I've been playing on it for about a week. But I just want to show you guys the experience, what you can expect out of a $1,500 build in this size form factor with the Fractal Ridge. Overall, the gaming experience has been great, but we'll go through some Fortnite, some Cyberpunk, maybe some Valorant, just to show you guys kind of some FPS numbers with temperatures you should expect, what the noise level is of the PC as well. So we've been gaming on the Fractal Ridge with Fortnite, overall sitting at 190 FPS, which looks amazing on this 240 hertz OLED from Pixio. In terms of temperatures, we're looking at right around, 43 degrees C, peaking at 57 degrees C on our 4070 Ti. And in terms of our CPU, looking at 75 degrees Celsius, peaked at around 90 degrees C on the CPU, mainly during that one kind of gameplay scene where you have the wings on. It just kind of, yeah, it adds a lot of textures. It adds a lot more performance, like processing, because you're just viewing more of the map. But in that scenario, only hitting 90 degrees C and having the cooler kind of ramp up for a little bit, bring the temperatures back down without thermal throttling. That's kind of what you can expect from this machine in terms of games. Like, it's going to be tested for sure, but you're not going to break the thermal throttle limits in games for the most part. And if you do, it'll be for very short periods of time. So first up for Cyberpunk, before we jump into some actual gameplay, we're going to run the benchmark Ray Tracing Ultra and see what kind of performance this thing gives us. So far so good, looking at around 90 FPS in kind of the start of the benchmark scene. But we'll see how it performs once we get outside. Usually that's where the performance takes a bit of a hit. But so far the machine isn't actually getting that crazy loud. So we'll look at the temperatures after the fact, but so far so good. There we go. So 96 FPS on average with Ray Tracing Ultra settings. Not too shabby for a 4070 Ti at 12600K in a case this small. But let's jump into some actual gameplay and see what the sound levels are, see what the temperatures look like when we're actually gaming in Cyberpunk. So now that we've been gaming for a little bit, we're looking at around 75 degrees Celsius on the CPU at around, let's see, 4.5 gigahertz. Not a lot of processing going on right now. We're looking at around 38% CPU utilization with that 75 degrees C. And then on the GPU, looking at around 62 degrees Celsius on the GPU throughout this kind of gameplay on Cyberpunk. So very, very reasonable temperatures with this system. Overall, both in Fortnite, a more demanding game like Cyberpunk, overall, like an amazing, amazing PC build in a form factor this small that takes up this little footprint on your desk. So if you guys want to replicate this build, I'll put a link down in the description below to all of the different parts that I use inside of this Fractal Ridge build. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. And if you haven't already, get subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.